Okay. House Energy Policy Committee will come to order. Mr. Clerk, if you would please call the roll.
Chairman Glenn?
Here.
Representatives Houck?
Here.
Barrett?
Barely here.
Cole?
Water.
Tedder? Bolino?
Here.
Farrington?
Here.
Griffin?
Here.
Johnson?
Here.
LaFave? Lauer?
Here.
Riley?
Here.
Lazinski?
Here.
Deanda?
Here.
Garrett? Camilleri? Elder?
Here.
Green?
Here.
Sneller?
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Mr. Clerk, a note that Representative Tedder has joined us in the last 15 seconds as well. Need a motion to accept minutes from last week's meeting. Representative Houck so moves. Without objection, so ordered. Members of the committee, today we are going to invite DTE to testify in response to requests from the Public Service Commission for data regarding shutoffs for various reasons. I note that on January 18th there was a story in the news media, MLive I think it was, and the TV stations about Consumers Energy having shut off 5,000 customers because of a billing error just in the last several weeks, which they said they would restore quickly. So this is a problem the PSC has been addressing. I want to make sure members of the committee are aware of it. And I would draw to the committee's attention, there's only one reason that DTE or Consumers appears before this committee to brief us about this. You know, we're not hearing from Amway or Dow or Chrysler on customer service issues as we are from these two utilities. And the point is they are a state regulated and state privileged monopoly. Customers don't have the option, as they do in most other businesses, if they don't like the level of customer service, of just simply choosing a different provider. So from my perspective, that is the overall issue. We wouldn't be hearing from these folks except for the fact that citizens of Michigan have no choice but to accept their service, whatever level it may be. So with that, we're going to invite whoever's going to speak on behalf of DTE to come forward. We don't have a card that I'm aware of from Consumers, but they are certainly welcome to testify as well. The remainder of the time, we have some, looks to be dozens of additional cards of people who would like to talk about their experiences with shutoffs. And if I understand correctly, there's somebody here on behalf of Mr. Millard with a video that has to do with shutoffs that have nothing whatsoever to do with so-called smart meters, but shutoffs for various other reasons. So, ladies, if you would turn on the red button there and introduce yourselves, and welcome to this is Heather Rivard and Angie Pizzuti from Detroit Edison. Welcome, ladies, and would appreciate your testimony.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Glenn, Vice Chair Houck, Vice Chair Lazinski, and members of the House Energy Policy Committee. As the chair mentioned, my name is Heather Rivard, and I'm the Senior Vice President of Electric Distribution at DTE Energy.
My name is Angie Pizzuti. I'm the Executive Director of Customer Service Operations at DTE Energy.
Thank you for providing us the opportunity to testify today. We're going to begin our conversation by discussing our advanced metering infrastructure program, and then Angie's going to follow with the discussion of billing and service disconnection processes that are related to our new customer service platform that's otherwise known as Customer 360. In both of these cases, we've made significant progress in implementing these very important technologies, and we plan to discuss both the successes as well as some of the challenges that we have faced that have impacted our customers. Advanced metering infrastructure, otherwise known as AMI, upgrades the grid to improve the quality of service to our customers. This technology allows wireless communication between the meter and the utility, eliminating the need for expensive and sometimes intrusive.
Pardon the interruption.
Yes.
I've said this in the prior hearing, and I'll let you use your time however you want, but the committee has heard, I think, 2 different 90-minute sessions on the issue of smart meters and that issue in particular, and I'm trying to focus the time we spend this 90 minutes on the shutoff process as opposed to rehashing I know that we're going to have witnesses in a few minutes that that's the reason they got shut off, but I'm going to direct them to do the same thing. We're not here to relitigate the smart meter issue. We're talking about smart meter shut-off policy.
Okay.
So if you want to spend your time talking about smart meters, I'll let you do that, but I'm just
No,
telling you.
I'm happy to skip those. I had a couple paragraphs on that. It's in the testimony, so I'll just skip that for my
Pardon the interruption.
remarks. No problem. So we've nearly completed installation of AMI throughout our service territory with 2.6 million electric meters installed and only 4,000 remaining to be installed. While we are convinced of the benefits of AMI, we understand that not all of our customers share that same view. And that's why we've worked in conjunction with the MPSC to create the opt-out program, which so far less than half of 1% of our customers have chosen to opt out of the program. Our implementation has been seamless for the vast majority of customers, with over 99.99% installed without any issue or concern. But there remains a small segment of customers who we need additional outreach and communication to finish the installation process. Leading up to today, you've heard from customers who experienced service interruptions due to blocked or locked meters. And I would like to take a moment to explain these situations and processes for addressing them, because I think that's the main thing that's leading up to the concerns that are being brought to the committee today. To your point, blocked meters are those that are simply inaccessible to our employees. For example, a dog in the backyard, or meters located in a locked building that may inadvertently prevent us from installing an AMI meter because we cannot reach the meter. In contrast, a locked meter is a meter in which the meter itself has been intentionally chained or otherwise locked by the customer to prevent the meter upgrade. And there's 4 pictures in the handout that we provided you of locked meter examples. In both scenarios, the customer is contacted several times with written communication to schedule meter upgrades. Most customers either agree to schedule an upgrade or choose to opt out of the program. However, those who do not respond or continue to lock their meters are disconnected from service. Cases in which meters have been locked are especially serious, as they undermine the safety of the customer, his or her neighbors, and DTE employees. I want to be clear that even though the meters are located on private property, they are owned by DTE and are a critical part of the utility grid. Tampering in any way with electric infrastructure is highly dangerous. Additionally, locks on meters prevent our employees from cooperating with first responders to disconnect electric or gas service in the event of an emergency, like a fire. Just as it would be not acceptable to lock a fire hydrant in front of your home, it is irresponsible and unsafe to lock a utility meter. Over the course of our implementation of the AMI program, we have disconnected service to less than 700 customers due to blocked or locked meters in accordance with MPSC rules. Unfortunately, 18 of these disconnects, 18 of the 700, were done in error, where the customer either already had an AMI meter or had scheduled an appointment for a meter replacement. In each of these cases, we restored service as soon as we recognized or were made aware of the error. And we take these incidents seriously and have adjusted our processes going forward to prevent such errors from occurring in the future. So with that, I'm going to transition over to Angie, who's going to talk about the Customer 360 program.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Angie Pizzuti, and I've been working on the Customer 360 program as the deployment lead for the past 2 years. In April 2017, DTE transitioned to a new customer service platform based on SAP technology, which we call Customer 360 or C360. Before implementing this technology, DTE utilized 130 standalone systems to administer our billing and customer service functions. In many cases, these 130 programs or systems did not communicate with one another and were approaching end of life. The end-of-life nature of this software began to impact the reliability of our customer service processes, and as such, we made a decision to begin to replace it. SAP technology, which is what we utilize in C360, is a widely used platform across many large industries. And as of this date, approximately 140 utilities across the nation utilize SAP to administer their billing and customer service functions. Customers in every industry are demanding more accessible, convenient methods of doing business. When we think about industries such as banking, or insurance, or even how we buy our groceries, that has materially changed in the last several years. And by embracing a technology in the 21st century, we believe that it allows us to begin to be able to modernize the way that we interact with our customers. C360 is our way of providing the same convenience for our customers. As the program matures, we expect that it will result in more convenient, personalized, and reliable customer experiences, as well as enhance our ability to resolve the concerns of the 3.4 million families and businesses that we serve. To give the committee some context, we began the planning process for C360 5 years ago. And one of our primary objectives from the beginning was to develop a strategy that would minimize service interruptions during the transition. To that end, we contracted nearly 400 additional customer service representatives during our transition to maintain our high standards of service. We wanted to ensure that our customers would be able to get a hold of us, and we would be accessible to them to handle any issues that may arise during conversion. As of today, our customer service metrics, including handle time and average speed of answer, have all returned to target range as they were prior to our implementation. This swift return to baseline following a massive billing technology transition is unprecedented in the utility industry. In fact, DTE Energy was granted SAP Utility of the Year award for its execution of the C360 transition when compared to similar efforts of other companies. Having said that, we realize that DTE's comparative success is of no comfort to those customers who were negatively impacted during the transition. Despite our preparations, we recognize that in the process of transitioning 3.4 million customers to a brand new platform, some customers did experience billing issues that have impacted the quality of their service and caused them frustration. One of the issues I'd like to discuss with you is related to shutoffs. The MPSC establishes and enforces billing and shutoff rules for all Michigan utilities. These rules give strict requirements for all aspects of that process, including the number of times and the manner in which customers must be contacted prior to shutoff, the time of day we can disconnect service, and deadlines for how quickly we must restore service upon resolution of billing issues. We adhere to these billing rules and utilize a strict internal process for recognizing non-payment, notifying customers of intent to disconnect at several junctures, and ultimately disconnecting service. Errors in the new C360 billing platform did disrupt our normal business processes, resulting in approximately 5,300 incidents of wrongful disconnections. 99% of these disconnects were customers whose accounts were in arrears and subject to disconnection for non-payment. These customers did receive some notification, but not the duplication of notice required by the MPSC. All wrongfully disconnected customers were immediately restored to normal service upon our identification of these errors. One of the other areas which we've had some difficulty with during our transition is actually a strength of our new system. All bills now go through a very extensive quality check prior to being sent out. Under normal operating conditions, approximately half of 1% of our bills are flagged for potential errors each month and are subsequently delayed in being sent to our customers. Errors in these delayed bills are generally resolved by DTE customer service employees within the same billing cycle. However, during the transition, a portion of these flagged bills were delayed for several consecutive months, inconveniencing the affected customers. DTE's worked steadily to decrease the backlog of customers who have not received multiple bills from a peak of approximately 30,000 to a subset of 4,000 most recently. We continue to maintain a focus on these customers, and we do review progress of these customers with the MPSC staff weekly. We fully recognize the impact of the service interruptions, and we understand that this is a serious inconvenience to our affected customers. Our customer service teams are working diligently to correct any outstanding billing issues resulting from the transition. We've identified errors in the system, fixed them, and our customer service teams have embedded additional tests in the system to error-proof the disconnect process in the future. DTE Energy self-identified our customer service errors and alerted the MPSC to the problem ourselves. We've maintained full transparency throughout this process, and we're currently participating in an MPSC review of the utility billing processes. Going forward, we're committed to continue to improve C360 to minimize errors and provide the high caliber of service our customers have come to expect and quite frankly deserve. We've been Michigan's hometown utility since we began operations here in the state 170 years ago. Our employees live and work in the same communities as our customers. We would never introduce technology or service changes unless we believe it benefits our customers, promotes safety, and improves our service. Thank you again for this opportunity to testify here today. Heather and I are happy to answer any questions you may have regarding C360 or AMI.
I do have a couple of questions. Can you tell me what takes priority, the rules regarding winter shutoffs for senior citizens in regards to people who were in arrears, because you said there were 5,300 cases of people who were actually had not paid their bills. And you have rules that say you can't shut certain people off, and I assume you also have this charitable program, at least Consumers does. Do you also have a charitable program where you help people who can't pay their bill?
Yeah, so in answer to your first question, none of the 5,300 or 5,200 that were cut for non-payment between November 1st and present were seniors. We have verified that. Okay. And in terms of low-income customers, we do offer LSP for our customers, and we also work with agencies. That doesn't prevent them from shut-off, but we definitely work with other agencies to try to give customers options. We work with United Way and others.
What is LSP?
Sorry, that's our low-income self-sufficiency program.
And could you tell us how that works? You said it doesn't prevent shutoffs, but
it will. Well, you have to continue to maintain the plan. So it's subsidized by MEEP dollars, and the customer is put on an affordable plan that we agree on, and as long as they maintain their payments, then they are prevented from shut-off.
So they may be making something less than their full bill, but as long as they're making some payment,
Correct.
You're helping subsidize them. And MEEP is?
It's an energy assistant program.
Okay. I know we've got an
Michigan.
agricultural MEEP. We've got an education MEEP. So
energy assistant program.
Okay, great. Representative Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. In one of your paragraphs, you said that we take these incidents seriously and have adjusted our process to prevent such errors in the future. Can you go over how you've adjusted those, and for specific question, is this a software issue or the way the data is entered and the interpretation of the value of that data by the program?
So what we've embedded in our system is a check that will go in. So we'll get a list of customers that are eligible for shutoff. You know, they haven't paid and they're in that status. And what we do is then we match it up against, we embed a test that verifies that the customer's been properly noticed, they've gotten their red bills, they've gotten their notice of intent, there's no holds on their account, there's no active billing issues on their account, and there's no active MPSC complaints on that account related to those billing issues. And only then will we then disconnect. So we've got like a scrub, a final scrub before we go ahead and cut.
All that done electronically, or is there
so presently it's a mix of both. And so what we're moving towards later, I guess it would be into February now, is implementing totally an embedded test within the system to do that so that we can further error-proof even human error.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Question by Representative DeAnda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony here today. I guess a couple questions I have is what was the average past due account? What was the dollar amount on all these folks that were past due? Do we have an idea?
I don't have an idea with me. We can definitely get that information and get back to you. We don't cut customers that are in arrears by less than $100. I can tell you that, but I don't know what the average was.
I would appreciate that. I think that would give the insight to a lot of us.
We'll definitely get that and get back to you with that.
And was there a specific area in these areas geographically that was an issue?
No,
Your service
geographics
footprint?
did not play a role in that. It was just general cuts that were made during a time period.
And then the last question I have, Mr. Chairman, is what's the percentage, if we could get the data from those shutoffs, what's the percentage of the electric hot water tanks? Because I know that that's one of the biggest expenses that people have, and I'd like to have that also.
Just to clarify, the percentage of people's bills that's related to electric hot water tanks, we can get that for you as well.
And if there's a two-charge, is there a two-charge for the different meters? Is there a charge for electric hot water tank besides the regular meter? I'd like to know if you also charge them for that.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Just,
Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry, just to clarify, were you looking for the number of hot water meter shutoffs?
I'd like to know the percentage of the shutoffs that you have, that those customers of yours that have electric hot water tanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, ladies, you'll write a letter to each member of the committee with that information, or?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much. Representative Lauer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last week when we were in committee, we heard some testimony on power being cut at the road, which would seem to make sense if the meter was locked. I know you can't get to it. That makes sense. But somebody talked about literally like coming in with loppers and just like cutting the wire. Could you speak to that if that's something that you guys would ever do?
So for AMI disconnects, it's called a disconnect at the pole. And one of the embedded tests that we have to make sure we're not cutting anyone in error, because as I mentioned, some of the people that were cut actually had an AMI meter. Of the 18 that were erroneously cut, about 10 actually already had the AMI meter. So one of the things we've implemented is that when someone goes out to potentially execute a cut due to a blocked or locked meter, we send a meter representative as well as the cut crew. And the meter representative will try to validate whether there's an AMI meter or not before the cut crew proceeds with the cut. So when it comes to cutting, it depends on whether the wires are bucket accessible or not. So if they're bucket accessible, they would go up in the bucket and cut the wire at the pole. If they're not bucket accessible, they have specific fire retardant equipment that they use to cut the wire from the ground. So that's probably what was being referred to. But it's not it's a specific equipment used in the utility industry. It's not just something from the local store.
Follow up, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Completely separate issue, just another question. Have you guys worked on implementing a new computer system either with DTE before or with other companies? Can you just kind of speak to that at all?
Have we had experience implementing a computer system prior to C360?
Right, because I understand, from my business background, those can be tough to implement, and it's not always easy to get all the bugs worked out of. I just didn't know if you could speak to that issue at all.
Do you want to elaborate on the 5-year preparation?
We have implemented other billing systems at DTE. Our last one, I believe, was early 2000s. End of the 1990s, I believe. And so we did a lot of benchmarking on, as we embarked on this program, a lot of benchmarking around what are some of the things that we really needed to pay attention to. And what we found is that we defined some stabilization metrics, and we hit for those stabilization metrics for the first part, but we did go in eyes wide open that with a massive transformation like that, very similar to a heart transplant for our company, there could be some issues that we would try to remediate quickly and recover with our customers. Does that help?
A follow-up question as well. Did you indicate you only use the cutting at the pole response when the meter is locked?
Locked or blocked, okay. And when we've been unable to contact the customer to arrange for access to the meter, either access because it was blocked or access because it was locked.
Okay. Representative Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for coming in to clarify a few things. As Representative Lauer mentioned in previous testimony, we had a gentleman here with his quite elderly grandmother. I believe she was over 90 years old. Certainly fits the profile of a senior citizen that would be protected from a shutoff for a past due balance. I believe he may be the one that had the lawnmower deck bolted and chained to the meter. In your example, he at least described a similar self-locking mechanism that he had come up with. My question for you is, I believe he said that it was in the period of time in which a senior citizen would be protected from shutoff for a past due balance, and yet they were cut off from receiving service for this dispute regarding their meter. Does DTE have any protections in place for seniors who may be current on their balance with you, so they're paying their bills and they're up to date, but they're in the window of time that they should be protected from a shutoff, and yet because of a meter dispute, they are shut off anyway?
That should not occur. The winter protection rules apply to all cutoffs.
Can you assure us then that no one has been shut off in that period of time for a meter dispute?
To the best of my knowledge, no one has been cut off that's a senior citizen since November 1st, which is when the winter protection started.
Okay.
I'd be happy to look into a specific example if one can be provided.
I believe, I'm not certain of this, but I believe there could be others testifying today that may have had a different experience than what you're describing. I know the gentleman that was here before, the bill was in his grandmother's name, who was here with him, and he was assisting her with the testimony. And I'm pretty sure they described a shutoff at a time that was in that protected window of, November 1st to April 1st?
Yes.
I mean, I know they said it was quite cold in the house and everything else.
It's possible that they were cut off before November 1st and hadn't yet called in to be restored, but I would have to look into the specifics of the case.
Okay.
But we did not do any cutoffs of senior citizens for AMI or any other reason after November 1st.
Okay. So that's your position that couldn't have happened?
To the best of my knowledge, but if someone brings forward a situation, I would be more than happy to look into it and understand what went wrong.
Okay. Thank you.
Representative Sneller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your testimony today. In your testimony, you mentioned that when these disconnects were in error, how long did it take you to correct that error and restore the power on an average? Hours, days, weeks?
I'll speak to AMI and then I'll turn it over. So for the 18 erroneous disconnects in the AMI area, as soon as we became aware of them, we fixed them as fast as possible, typically the same day. When it wasn't an error and it was a shutoff and the person called to have a meter change, the rule is that we have to restore within 48 hours. So that should be the max time after someone calls in for restoration.
And I have a similar answer to Heather's. As soon as we were made aware of an issue, we escalated a restore. In many cases, they are AMI restores, so they take hours to restore. Of the 5,000 that I talked about, testified to a little while ago, actually those customers we proactively restored. We had no customers call in and say, I wasn't noticed properly or anything of that nature. However, as soon as we realized that we had made an error, in an abundance of caution, we restored all of them that were AMI immediately, and we did site visits to the remainder the next day. So once we're aware of it, we make it a priority to escalate and restore those customers immediately, hours, and to Heather's point, within 48 hours at the latest.
Follow-up question, of the 5,300 you mentioned, how quickly did you discover your error?
Well, that very variable. So with the 5,000 were customers that had been cut in the latter part of 17 in December and the early part of January. And once we were even made aware that we could have had an error, we restored them immediately. So depending on when they would have been cut, it is variable.
Okay. this is not intended as a gotcha. I just had a conversation, and Rodney, if I misunderstood, correct me, but I thought you had said it was a week that you restored immediately upon discovering the error, but you didn't discover it for a week. Did I misunderstand? Yeah, sure.
Chair of the committee, when we found out that, as Angie was testifying, that
This is Rodney Cole with DTE.
my apologies, Rodney Cole, DTE Energy, and I'll yield to the experts here. But when we found out that there was an issue, as was testified, we just recently found that out. So we just recently confirmed, as Angie mentioned, once there was we suspected that there may be a problem, they took proactive action, but it was confirmed just here recently.
Okay, my question was, did I misunderstand? I thought I recollected that you told me you immediately responded when you discovered the error, but that it had been a week before you discovered the error, or am I remembering miscorrectly?
No, I'm not familiar. I would yield to them as far as the time frame for which these occurred.
So they were customers that had been cut between December 1st and November and January 13th. We know when we had had difficulties sending out the notice of intents. Some of them had already previously gotten one, but regardless of what all the nuances were, we just went ahead and restored all the customers, and we believe a subset of them were in the population, but without having us try to figure it all out before we got perfect, we just restored everyone.
Okay, I'm going to ask one more time. The experts, can you tell me how long it took you? I mean, I understand you said you restored them within 24 hours, but how long was it from the point at which their power was cut off until you discovered the error so that you could take 24-hour action?
So at the very longest duration would have been customers that would cut the first week of December.
I'm going to ask one more time. How long a time was it between the time you discovered the error? How long did it take from the time their power was cut off till you discovered an error?
December 1st to January 12th.
Okay, so 6 weeks?
At the outset.
But surely there weren't people 6 weeks without power.
No. Well, the majority restored on their own. So we get 70 to 80% that restore within 1 to 3 days.
And you mean by that they called you?
Called and paid, yep.
Okay.
When we discovered the error was on January 12th.
Okay.
A potential error. And then we immediately restored then. But there were customers that went back.
Okay.
All of the customers Angie's referring to are the ones that were in arrears and had been noticed once, and we failed to provide them the duplicate notice. And so they could have been out as long as December 1st to January 12th. However, many of them, realizing that they were in arrears, called in earlier and paid their bill. And as soon as we discovered the error on January 12th, almost all of them, if not all of them, have AMI meters. And so the process to turn them back on is hours.
Okay. And if they didn't call you after their power was off, they already knew they were in arrears.
Correct.
So they might have just accepted that was the end result of not having paid their bill.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Representative Hout.
I noticed that at the beginning of your testimony you talked about having meters locked, and it was a safety issue because the fire department couldn't pull the meters. I don't know if people realize how all you do is clip it and you pull it out. It's just like a breaker in your breaker, right? So that they can pull that out quicker than they can go to the road and clip wires.
The issue is, if you look at the pictures, we're talking about locked meters. Mm-hmm. If you look at this picture, because it's an analog meter and it's locked, if I get a call from the fire department and they ask me to come disconnect power, if someone has an AMI meter, I can disconnect it within seconds at the request of the fire department.
From your control room?
Yes.
Okay.
If they have an analog meter, I have to send a crew out there to remove the meter as you described. The EFO person who goes out there to do it doesn't have a bucket truck or a pogo stick or qualified to cut it at the pole. So then you have to wait for a crew.
To come
By that
it.
point, the house is burned down.
Now, when when you had your problem with your like 5,000 customers, or say I lose electricity, is there, I know when you have a leak or a wire down, there's a special phone number you can call for that. Do you have that for people that's lost power, or do you have to go through your general automated system?
Well, if someone was calling in an emergency situation, I don't know if this ties to your first question. Our first responders, fire departments have a special PIN code to get through to us.
I understand that, but
Okay.
say one of your customers.
The 5,000 that were cut,
Yeah.
is there a special process?
Yeah, was there, or?
No, the customers would call the 1-800 number as every other
As
customer
every other
would.
customer would.
And if they're reporting any kind of a wire down or an emergency, we handle that appropriately.
So you have over 3 million customers, and
3.4.
you implemented a new computer system, and you had something went wrong with 5,000 of them, roughly,
Yeah.
is the long, okay. Yeah, it's unfortunate for that. It's too bad we couldn't have caught that. I think, we can, as a state, we can look at our own, we implemented a new system with the unemployment, and we can, we know there's pains. I just wish, we could have got people, back on. And I can understand the frustrations from a customer's point, because if I was paying my bills and all of a sudden my electricity was cut off, naturally I'd be upset. Thank you.
Representative Farrington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question. Do you guys follow a certain policy when determining shut-off for people with medical needs that require power?
Yes. If the customer calls in and we are able to confirm their medical need, we work with them and their doctor to confirm what their needs are, and we do put holds on the account. We recently moved to a 365-day hold for those customers that qualify for a medical hold before we reassess it.
Vice Chair Lisinski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have a question. Can you describe how the shut-off procedures have changed, one, with the implementation of the billing system, and two, with the use of AMI meters as part of the shut-off process and procedures?
So the process pre and post has remained very similar in terms of there's a red bill, a notice of intent, some phone calls, and then the actual shut-off. So that has not changed. The system that underlies it has changed, and the cut process, we find about 90% of our cuts are AMI now. So that's changed as well. It allows us to get out there and cut, and it also allows us to restore much more quickly than previously.
Can you describe how that's different, the transition to the new smart meters? Like physically, how is it a different process now?
We no longer have to send a crew to actually cut the service. You can remotely cut it from the headquarters, in accordance, of course, with the billing rules.
So when you say that process takes hours to put someone back on, what is the process that takes hours to turn someone back on once it's determined their power should be restored?
Hours is probably an extreme case. It's really minutes. It takes getting the order to the right person that has the right access, because as you can imagine, not every employee has access to the AMI system. And so once we verified that they should be restored, and the right person with access has the ability to turn them back on, at that point it takes minutes.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask one question about the 360 program? So when we're looking at the 360 programs, my understanding is the 5,300 people who were shut off were all in arrears, or they were in good standing with the company with their payments?
So of the 5,300, 5,252 of them were in arrears. We had some that were cut due to AMI, and another small portion, 16 I believe, that were cut because cut in error, given the fact that they had an open MPSC complaint with us. But the vast majority were customers that were in arrears that had been at least noticed once regarding their potential shutoff.
So the error that you discovered on January 12th was the lack of notice, the lack of secondary
Lack of
notice?
redundant noticing.
So you just described in general the shut-off process. Could you just kind of give me the specific steps in the shut-off process and which notice was omited?
So
and
there's
quite
a-
frankly, I'm curious how that can happen with a subset of customers versus happening across all customers.
So there was a 10-day notice, which customers did receive, and then there's a follow-up 5-day notice. That notice was inadvertently suppressed in the new system. So customers cut during that time period, all customers cut during that time period, did not receive that second notice. Many of them did receive additional phone calls from our partners, letting them know that they, were in arrears and needed to pay and advise them of shut-off dates. So it was that time period.
So it wasn't just a random subset of 5,000 customers.
No,
it was customers who were scheduled for shut-off between
Correct.
December 31st and January 2nd. Okay,
Correct.
thank you. January 12th, thank you.
Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In a free market system, when a company alienates its customers, they're free to leave. We don't have that in a monopoly system. So when you make a mistake, as you guys admitted to violating the MPSC rules, what is the penalty that you pay? Do the customers receive any sort of credit?
We take our customer satisfaction very seriously, and so to me the biggest penalty that we pay is detriment to our customers and having inconvenienced them, and that is the biggest that I would mention,
So there
as
is
well
no,
as
there is no financial penalty you would pay.
there is no financial penalty that we pay for the errors that we're describing here today now.
So your only incentive then is out of your goodwill towards your customers.
Yes, which is a very good incentive for us to have.
Thank you.
I cannot resist asking a follow-up question. I had this in mind, but since you opened the door with the expression of your commitment to satisfaction of your customers, I share the concern that Representative Johnson just voiced, that if people were free to choose another provider and they're not happy with your service, obviously like any other business, that's what they would do. In this case, they don't have that freedom to choose because the state, as a matter of policy, chooses not to give them that choice. I am not a physician, and I think there are two members of the House who are. Neither one of them is on this panel. So I'm in no position to judge people's concerns about their health and how they might be impacted by advanced meters. But I'm going to guess that members of the committee and you would concede that the people who have testified before us, true or not, from a medical standpoint, absolutely believe their health is being negatively affected. Others are concerned about privacy. You said it was 0.5%. And I direct this question to either of you ladies or Mr. Cole if I was your public relations consultant, because I, of all issues that I've experienced in 3 years in the legislature, no issue has generated as much media coverage, especially television stories, and I'm not sure why, as this issue does. From a public relations standpoint, if it's only 0.5%, can't you guys figure out some way to make it go away? Let them go? In some way, I mean, is it really worth the continued negative publicity on television stations all across the state of Michigan if you are as sensitive to your customer satisfaction as you say you are? And I hear the same thing from consumers. And I don't have any reason to doubt the sincerity, but certainly people who've had their power cut off or been forced to accept something they think negatively affects their health might have some reason to question that. So I guess I would just encourage you to make this go away. You know, you guys have multiple full-time paid lobbyists. You're here, you have a presence in the Capitol. Hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue moving through your two companies annually. The people who've showed up to testify on this issue don't have paid lobbyists. The only thing they have are their elected representatives. So, you know, I don't feel sorry for you. You're a government privileged monopoly. So we guarantee you by law a 90% share of the market and a guaranteed return on investment. So don't feel sorry for you. But we're all that the folks who have a complaint have. So I guess I would just say, if I was your PR consultant, I'd be telling you to figure out some way to let these people go. Because if they sincerely think it's affecting their health, they're not going to go away. they're not going to stop talking about it, stop trying to avoid a circumstance in which they're concerned about their health and that of their families. I guess that was more of an editorial than a question. If you want to respond, that'd be great. If you don't, I'll move on to...
I'd be happy to explain why we cannot continue to use analog meters, which I think addresses part of your concern. Actually, prior to that, I would just address that in all states where deregulation has occurred, the distribution company and the electric infrastructure is not deregulated. It has to be maintained by a single company, including the meters. It's the power and the electricity itself that comes into play when we're talking about choice. So even in a deregulated environment, you'd still be facing these issues around meter technology and meter upgrades and distribution system upgrades. As it relates to analog meters, the technology is more than 20 years old. It's made of windings and springs, and it is the meters that we have out there are well past their useful life. They are no longer in a position where I could say that they are accurate in either direction of being overbilling or underbilling customers. In addition to the technology being outdated, as I just mentioned, having an analog meter creates a safety risk for the customer in that home as well as their neighbors due to the inability for us to remotely disconnect that meter in the event of an emergency. I do understand that some people have deep concerns about RF waves. That said, an opt-out meter does not transmit any RF waves. So an opt-out meter in non-transmitting mode is no different than an analog meter. And so that is always an option.
I guess my response to that would be your 1/2 of 1% is still thousands, and I suspect some enterprising entrepreneur would be happy if the choice were available to provide people who wanted an analog meter. And I would observe that whatever safety risk there is nothing different than what we've all lived with our entire lives since when we had analog meters. And folks from consumers told me they last year, I guess, they didn't have any analog meters until my smart meter went defective and the tech showed up and replaced it with an analog meter. The same week we'd been told they didn't have any. The tech said, I didn't identify myself. I was just standing there in my bathrobe, having been up all night keeping the fire going. And she told me what she did. She said, yeah, I just took one of the analog meters off the truck, put it right back on. The same week we'd been told you didn't have them anymore.
Well, that was, I believe you said consumers. Yeah, yes. We have not bought analog meters since 2007, nor are they manufactured.
Okay. All right. Let's keep order, please. Representative Lefebvre.
I had a question about going back to the elderly population. So what is the age at which you can't cut them off anymore during the winter months?
Senior citizen.
62. Okay. Is that only if the bill is in the 62-year-old's name?
Correct.
So if my grandmother married young to a brand new husband of 61 and a half and the bill got put in his name, and my grandmother at 75 is still the owner of the house, but the bill's in his name, her power could get shut off theoretically.
Person responsible for the bill.
Okay. And of course the same thing would be if grandma moved in the house with me and I stopped being fiscally responsible, didn't pay my bills, it could get cut
Correct.
off. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Lefebvre. Any other questions of these witnesses? If not, folks, appreciate your testimony this morning.
Thank you, sir.
You bet.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. And we now have, now, who is here in the absence of Brock Millard, who was ill? And you are, ma'am? I'm Linda Kurtz. All right, Linda, and have you put a card in?
I didn't put a card in because I understood that I was scheduled to speak.
Okay. Come up, and you've got a PowerPoint, is that correct? And as Mr. Millard described this to me, these shutoffs don't have anything to do with smart meters.
In the context of the person not attempting to refuse a smart meter, that is correct.
I'm not sure I understand that, but...
Well, it'll I'm clear in
Okay.
what I'm presenting.
Please proceed. And we've got at least a dozen other folks that would like to testify, and we've got about 35 minutes. So.
I will do my best. And I would like to say that the things that DTE had to say here.
Is your red button on, ma'am? Thank you. And please identify yourself.
The things that DTE, Linda Kurtz, I am head of the Smart Meter Education Network. We have about 2,200 members across the state of Michigan. I have not been up here before because I am extremely, extremely electrosensitive. So it is an effort to be here, but one that I think is worth it today. I will be, yeah, this thing kind of bothers me a little bit. The things that DTE brought up, I will be addressing in my talk, so I hope that you will bear with me. I have received literally thousands of calls over the last 6 years that I have been working on this issue. I have more contacts about this issue than anyone in the state, and so I really can address the things that they brought up. I don't even know that there is going to be enough time, but if you bear with me, what is in here is going to address just about every point.
Now, Ms. Kurtz, let me be clear on two things. We have 35 minutes left, so I want to make sure you're not saying your testimony might take longer than 35 minutes.
It will not take longer than 35.
Let's give you until the top of the hour about 8 minutes.
Okay, I had understood that, and Brock had talked with you about this, I was going to get 15 to 20 minutes.
He asked for 10.
Well,
so why don't you proceed? Let's quit debating how much time, and you proceed.
Okay. Boy. All right. First of all, analog meter opt-outs are in many states mandatory: California, Arizona, Texas, Florida, etc. They have a 43-year depreciable life. That is according to DTE Energy. That is a depreciable life. This is going to be really extremely difficult for me to do now. The day after Labor Day 2016, David Redmond of Sumter Township was shut off without notice by DTE. He awoke gasping for air because he is on a breathing machine. He had received no notice from DTE about the shutoff. After shutting him off, DTE left a notice on his door stating that a lock on his meter was a safety hazard. Now, the committee has gotten testimony from a number of fire department chiefs. That information has also been presented to the Michigan Public Service Commission in some of its hearings. I have spoken with a volunteer firefighter. Other members of the Smart Meter Education Network have spoken with their fire department representatives, fire chiefs. These people have said that a locking device, an enclosure, whatever it might be on a meter, hit the next button, on the meter is not an issue. And I can provide documentation for that. In fact, the last time that DTE pried off one of these, and I don't know what pictures DTE gave you to look at, but the last time that DTE pried off a so-called tater guard, which is a piece that goes over part of the meter housing, was in mid-December of this year in Ypsilanti, Michigan. Now, there may be other cases. That is the last one I know of. They have pried them off. They have cut them off. First responders have told us that they can very easily access the meter and get it off. So I don't think that that is, in fact, an issue. Now, moving on, in the summer of 1999 next. Yep. Greg Burgess had a pool put in. He called DTE to find out whether he might install a plexiglass cover near the pool for safety reasons. DTE told him that installing the cover was a good safety measure, and for 18 years, DTE had no issue with the cover. On the 26th of June, 2017, DTE shut off Mr. Burgess's electricity. He did not receive any notice. He was told by the letter they left on his door that his service had been shut off because he had a locking device on his meter. Mr. Burgess had no locking device, only the plexiglass cover that DTE had approved in 1999. Mr. Burgess had not received any communication, later found that he DTE had sent a letter to an address that was not his service address, not the address at which he received his bills or anything else. At the time DTE was shutting off his electricity, he was preparing to make a bid on a property. He was willing to bid up to $50,000. He got home to no electricity. He couldn't make the bid. He lost the property, which sold for under $50,000. He lost the food in his fridge and his freezer because DTE refused to restore power in a timely manner as required by law. It was over 5 days. He was not shut off for a locked meter. He had a device on his home that DTE itself had approved. He called DTE constantly. It was 5 days until they restored his electricity. His case is not unique in any way, just illustrative of many of them that are there. And I want to emphasize, Mr. Burgess had no particular interest in the smart meter issue. He contacted me after DTE shut him off. And that has happened many, many, many times. We're getting a lot more members because of these shutoffs. Next. And that's Mr. Burgess and his partner. And they now actually, interestingly, their ears ring constantly in their home since the installation of a smart meter. Again, this is a man who had no interest in the smart meter issue. Well, DTE's tactic, my impression, and I can provide supporting evidence for this, but my impression is that DTE did not want to shut off customers, let it be known that it was shutting off customers for refusal of a smart meter. And so what they began doing in March of 2015 was sending out a letter that said that the customer needed to respond to them because of a locking device on their meter. That was the term that they used, locking device. Now, for years, decades, even a century, DTE had had no issues with locks, big locks on meters. For example, Gail Travis had kept the meters at his house and his auto detailing business locked for over 15 years. DTE had never taken issue with the locks. Suddenly, in June 2016, DTE shut off his electricity because his meter was locked. Mr. Burgess, Mr. Travis had no particular interest in the smart meter issue and only contacted us after his meter had been shut off. His and his wife's informal complaint to the Michigan Public Service Commission was not even dealt with. He was shut off. This has also happened to many people. You got that one? Okay. So the letter that is being sent, it was, well, and continues actually to be sent out by DTE. DTE is sending out multiple different kinds of letters at this point, is nothing more than a pretext to force installation of the smart meter. The text of the letter itself makes this clear, stating your electric service will be disconnected on or after date if you do not remove the locking device and contact us immediately so that we can proceed with the installation of the smart meter. The letter doesn't say so that you and your neighbors are safe. Now, DTE says the letter is being sent out because the locking device is a condition that is unsafe for your family and your neighbors. If that were the case, the letter would say, please remove it so that we can proceed with, so that you and your neighbors are safe. That's not what it says. Christina Fortis, head of the Michigan Agency for Energy's Complaint Division, told me plainly that the intent of this letter is to get smart meters installed on the customer's house. We had a very long conversation. When Ms. Fortis was questioned as to why this pretext of claiming that the lock is a safety hazard was being used, next. Ms. Fortis, next. Ms. Fortis replied, I'm not their marketing person. Ms. Fortis said that the commission had approved the letter, but that she was unable to provide me with any documentation of that approval. I was also told that the winter protection plan did not, I was told this by Ms. Fortis, and it's also been at some of the MPSC hearings, the winter protection plan does not cover shutoffs except in cases of non-payment. So if you're old and you can't have a smart meter on your home, you can get shut off. If you're old and you can't pay your bill, you can't. DTE was up here testifying that no senior citizens have been shut off in the winter for refusal of an AMI meter. That is incorrect. One case, and I can supply many others, is Ellen Nelson, 78 years old, cut off December of 2016 for over a week. It was absolutely frigid at that time of year. And as I said, DTE for quite a few years was simply cutting or prying both locks and locking devices off meter housings, and the last time I am aware of them doing that was December 2017. Yep.
Need you to wrap up, please.
Okay. Okay, move on to the number of, so DTE began sending shut-off notices. Often people didn't even know it was a shut-off notice because there was a letter. In fact, I got one of those, and the only reason I knew it was a shut-off notice was because people had contacted me. The shut-off notice was on the back of the letter. And I actually didn't even think that I had actually gotten a shut-off notice, just a letter. And it was on the floor, and my cat flipped it over, and all of a sudden there was a shut-off letter in front of my face. Some people didn't even see that shut-off notice. Next. So here is testimony that DTE just submitted to the Michigan Public Service Commission. They say that they have shut off 478 customers in October and November of 2017 for refusing to accept a smart meter. And you will notice that in December of 2017, they say they have shut off an additional 20, again, in contrast to what DTE just presented up here. There's a lot that I could say about additional proof showing what they're trying to do. I will skip that. Two other things that I would like to say briefly. One is that over and over again, the question is being asked, why isn't the opt-out that DTE offers sufficient? It's very simple. Digital meters, whether they are smart meters with the radio frequency on, smart meters with the radio frequency off, or the non-transmitting meters, no RF in them at all, that Consumers Energy offers, generate voltage transients, commonly called dirty electricity. These voltage transients have been shown, and I can provide you with the scientific papers on that, to harm human health. So for someone like me and many other people, this is very simply a question about wanting and needing to be safe in our own homes. I would not be up here if DTE wanted to put a digital meter on my home that did not generate voltage transients. I would not be spending my time in Lansing. I would not be spending most of my free time working on this issue. We're asking for an analog opt-out. It's offered in quite a few states across this country of ours.
Thank you, Ms. Kurtz. Representative Lauer has a question.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You kind of got to the question a little bit, and it was about why was the opt-out meter not sufficient. I guess for a lot of us, what we don't understand is how is that not different from a different electronic device in your home, such as a television, a radio, clock radio, things of that nature? Like, why is this particular device creating this dirty energy, as you called it, and how do you know that? Like, how do you how have you come to those conclusions is what I'm curious to learn.
Okay, so what happens is that the meter has what's called a switched mode power supply in it. And that's something that you can see actually there. The 240 volts coming down from the power line has to be stepped down to about 4 to 10 volts to run the electronics in the meter. Otherwise, the meter gets fried out. It's a computer. And then the electricity has to be stepped up again to 240 or 120 volts in order to run, you know, the equipment in your home. So the process of stepping the electricity down and stepping it back up generates the voltage transients, the dirty electricity. What happens is that you, next picture, you have, oh, don't have it, previous one. What you have normally is a smooth wave going through your home every second, 60 hertz. The transients ride on that, and what they do is they radiate out into the room. Their electromagnetic field, they're coming out in millisecond bursts. It's like static. For people like me, my health is greatly affected. Other people, their health is affected. They don't know what's going on. So particularly people who get high blood pressure, high blood sugar problems, that's something that they're just not associating with the meter. And so I'm losing my track of answering your question now, so.
I guess what I don't understand is most of our appliances in our house, you know, it's
Oh, right, that was
110
the other
volts,
part.
you plug them
Yeah.
in, it steps it down to however many amps it's going to use or volts. Like my cell phone here, the charger has to step that power down to make it acceptable so it doesn't blow up my phone. So that process happens throughout the home. So I guess what I'm not clear on is how is this different and how is it causing the issue with the smart meter, but somehow it's not a problem for my television, for
Sure.
example, that's
Okay.
plugged in and it's got to step it down for that too.
I
It's
gotcha.
the same
I gotcha.
exact situation.
It's in general not as great of a problem with something like plugging your cell phone charger in or running CFLs. It is still a problem. It still generates dirty electricity. It generates it on that circuit that you have. So if your cell phone is plugged into circuit number 1 and your kitchen appliances don't, you know, aren't anything that generates dirty electricity, and they're on circuit number 2, that circuit is as clean as it can be given the fact that you probably have a smart meter. What's happening with a smart meter is that the electricity coming in is being contaminated essentially at the source, at the point of entry into your home, and so every circuit becomes contaminated. Now, there's different kind of metering equipment that you can use to measure the dirty electricity, ranging from oscilloscopes, which, you know, cost $10,000 and none of us own, down to some fairly simple devices that give you a good picture. So DTE put a smart meter on my home, September of 2015, unbeknownst to me, quite a surprise. I walked into my house not knowing it was on, and everything in my neck started clamping, pressure down into my head, then my shoulders started to clamp. I went down, I shut off the circuit breakers, I went outside, there was a smart meter. Now prior to that, I use a laptop, everything is hardwired, no wireless. Does that create some issues for me? Yes, it does create some issues for me. I can tolerate it, okay?
Ms. Kurtz, I want you to wrap up. You've
Yep.
now had 22 minutes.
Okay, I was trying to answer his question.
Gotcha. I understand. Anything further, Representative Lauer?
No, thank you.
Okay. Next, Mr. Redfield. Thank you, ma'am, for your testimony. I'm sorry, Representative Fave, did you have a question, Ms.? You sure? Okay. Mr. Redfield.
Good morning. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Very grateful for your time, Representative Glenn. I'm here as on behalf of the William Michael Redfield Estate as the occupant of the office of executor. To whom it may concern, this is on the record. There's a number of handouts I also gave you that you should have right now. I hope this will be recorded on the record, so it will be up on the internet. Our saga, I'm very brief. Our saga began with DTE October 31st, 2011, when we first posted the notice of non-consent for the AMI meter. The DTE letter writing campaign began in July of 13, whereby we promptly replied with polite yet firm non-consent to DTE's generous offers. After 30-plus certified mailings, DTE failed to honor any of the requests. We might also add that Attorney General Schuette, Governor Snyder, Chairman Tallberg, and this esteemed committee's previous chair were notified of these various shenanigans. During one of the interchanges with DTE, we offered an equitable solution to solve the main issue we have regarding the safety of these non-UL listed, non-ANSI certified, non-NEC listed, non-Michigan Building Code approved dangerous arc flash causing ungrounded fire hazard devices. Our main concern was to avoid installing the hazardous AMI contraption directly to the building we're responsible for protecting. That solution was to install it remotely near the underground termination point. DTE visited the site and agreed to provide a price to do this, and they failed to present this offer. As stated in the 2015 testimony, I have serviced DTE power plants for 30-plus years, and I'm very familiar with power supply systems. DTE does not allow any component for electrical service in their buildings without vendor assurances that all components conform to one or more of the certifying agencies noted above. You might ask why. Very simply, it boils down to transferring liability to the risk insurers. As I was investigating this, my insurance carrier stated they would not insure the home if the ungrounded, non-UL listed component was installed on the premises. This information was transmitted to DTE, and they ignored it. We even shared the internal field action bulletin DTE number 2015-002, dated April 23, 15, to DTE, showing a blown-up meter so their personnel could be on the lookout for these potentially life-threatening failures. Once again, we were ignored by DTE. On the morning of September 13, 17, I was met unannounced by the DTE goon squad of 6 at approximately 8:30 a.m., led by Nicole A. Willinger of 22369 Knollwood Drive, Brownstown Township. We were informed DTE was there to disconnect the power because there was a lock on the analog meter preventing DTE access. Mrs. Willinger was advised by me that she was ill-informed, and I showed her there was no lock. She asked if I wanted the meter. I stated no. Next page. Furthermore, Mrs. Willinger indicated that they had no AMI meters on site to install and that they would have to disconnect the power. I politely told her she has to do what she has to do, but there will be consequences for her actions. She contacted another DTE technician, Jeff Gunacki of 32102 Vegas Drive, Warren, and he came to the house with 2 AMI meters. In the meantime, we contacted the Troy Police Department to document the events, which I have the police report dated September 13, 17, stating I was forced under duress to accept the dangerous AMI meter. We were grateful for the 6 officers that arrived to make sure we secured the names of the DTE perpetrators. The irony in this message is the disconnect threat was under the auspices of MPSC Rule 460.136, which states in part that the power is being disconnected for health and safety when locks are present. There was no lock. However, now that we have 2 AMI meters installed, there are 3 locks mounted on them, keeping the occupants of this dwelling extra safe. During the meter installation process, we asked Mrs. Willinger if the fire department or police have a device to open the DTE locks in the event of a fire. She stated they do. When I contacted the fire chief in Troy, he emphatically stated that Troy does not have any unlocking device for meter removal. This is a very unsafe condition, particularly if the first responders need to battle a fire and are unable to get through to DTE in an emergency. No wonder the MPSC has the rule in place. Over the past 7 years, we've made numerous attempts to work with DTE, always met with manipulative tactics and lies. While we're impressed with the good folks who support this initiative, it appears the Michigan Energy Policy Committee is unable to move this to the floor because the small money from the hardworking Michigan citizens is not enough to compete with the deep pocket lobbyists funded by DTE in Lansing or elsewhere. At this point, our goal is to get the analog choice pushed forward, and we implore you to do that, please. In addition, we'd like this government body to assist in getting the locks currently installed removed from the unsafe AMI meters on any building as requested by its occupants so they can be pulled by the appropriate first responders in the event of an emergency. Thank you for this opportunity. I'd like to just do one quick follow-up, if I have time, Senator Glenn, with respect to Representative Lauer's request about the transients. The whole issue is that the transient frequencies coming through on the primary side into the circuit breaker goes throughout every circuit in the home. And we have found and documented through scopes that it's frequencing and resonating at about 14 hertz. The human body resonates at about 7 to 8 hertz. People who are hypersensitive to this problem, the issue is that that frequency is just too close to their natural frequency in their body, and that's what's causing the issues. It's well documented. It's not rocket science. It's a really simple issue. There are instruments out there that can be put onto the primary side to knock down the transients, but again, the whole issue is Why are we being jammed down our throats with these meters? We need you guys to step up and make a change. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Redfield. Carol Garcia. And we are now about 8 minutes away from needing to adjourn to make it to the next committee. So if you would, Carol, have some consideration for the dozen cards behind you.
Good morning, Chairman Glenn and the Energy House Committee. My name is Carol Garcia. I'm here because of two people that were shut off, couldn't make it. Sarah Monteleone and Aime Martinez, who live in Shelby Township. They both work for the government, and they were at a funeral in Texas, and while they were gone, DTE shut off their power. And when they came back, all their food was spoiled and everything, and they didn't get notice of this was going to take place. That's one. And then there was a dentist in Dennis Stiles, St. Clair Shores, who locked up his meter because he didn't want a DTE meter, and they cut the locks off his meter. In 2012, I moved to Rochester, and in 2013, DTE opted me out without my consent. And I told them I was going to get an electrician because this was affecting my health, to put the analog meter on. They told me if I did that they would cut my power, basically. I had 2 analog meters on my bedroom wall. And you guys have all my documents pertaining, to the medical issues that I'm having, but that's not why I'm talking about this today. DTE said at the last hearing that I was at that only 7,000 people opted out. That's because the rest of us aren't crazy to opt out because it's not a true opt-out. Why would we pay $67 one-time fee and $9.80 a month after that when we don't get our analog meter? DTE says that we don't have any more analog meters. That's not true. They've refurbished them now in Florida and other places. So that's not true. If other states have an opt-out where you get an analog meter, why can't we? There are some of us that are very sensitive, highly sensitive to this technology and cannot handle it. It makes us deadly sick. When I have to start seeing a cancer doctor because of my health, because you guys don't want to do anything for us, DTE, to help us, well, there's a big problem here. And I know tons of people who are being affected by this technology. So something needs to be done.
Ms. Garcia, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
You bet. Any questions? Not David Traver? Traver? Welcome, sir. If you would, the red light's on, so as quickly as you can, please share with us the summary of your thoughts.
Okay, to whom it may concern. The more important, my wife and I are of smart meters. The more determined we are to stand ground on the opportunity of smart meters, opposition of smart meters. My wife and I bought our home in 1977. An analog meter came with our home. The analog meter, along with everything else, is under the grandfather clause with the home is purchased. In February 2016, we were notified by DTE to change the smart meter. We added locks beside their locks on our casing. In September 2017, we received a letter from DTE stating that they would disconnect on or after September of 2017. On September 18th, 2017, we did not agree to the change to the smart meter. On September 19th, DTE cut off our power at the utility pole. In January 2018, DTE trespassed on my property, even though we had not been their customers since September 19th. They cut our locks along with their locks on my casing and put their smart meters on. We refuse to be customers of DTE. I am one of thousands of people have been bullied, threatened, or disconnected by DTE. I hope you have the compassion to question the monopoly of DTE and the control they have over their customers' lives. As an example, I use a CPAP machine, and I have not been able to use it since September 19th, 2017. Thank you.
Because?
because I have no power to run the CPAP machine.
Thank you, Mr. Traver.
Okay.
Carol Wynn. Welcome, Ms. Wynn.
Thank you. My name is Carol Wynn. I live in Columbiaville, and I am here representing a resident from Columbiaville and his deceased wife.
And Ms. Wynn, we got about 2-3 minutes at the
Okay.
most.
Now, this letter is like 12 pages long, but it's big text. Can I go ahead?
No,
Okay.
you may not read a 12-page letter
Okay.
in 2 to 3 minutes.
Okay. So, Chair, you, Representative Glenn, you do have a copy of this letter. This letter is all about this gentleman and his wife going through a situation where she found out she had cancer. They did not want the smart meter. She was in Chicago getting treatment and got a call that their power was being turned off. She had medicines in the refrigerator. She had other equipment there. She was on her way home. She was called back. She had, at that point, the cancer had spread. She is now deceased. And it's just, I hope you all get a copy of this letter because it's a very, very stressful time in their lives that they had to deal with someone possibly taking away their electricity away from their home. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. John Holton, can you say what you've got to say in 1 minute, sir? Appreciate your joining us today. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Glenn, for giving me this time to go ahead and speak. The biggest issue we can say here at this time is that people need to be represented and protected. You take an oath to obey the Constitution, to represent us and protect us. And the people here who are losing their power through no fault of their own, they just want a good, healthy living to go ahead, continue on with their lives. The analog meter was never broken, didn't need fixing or anything. DTE is making a profit on that issue. They're making millions of dollars. The people need to be represented and protected, not harmed for simply wanting to go ahead and keep their analog meter. And this is the issue that you see all these people behind us. People are freezing to death, running generators 24 hours a day, 7 days a week out of their pocket because DTE cut them loose at a pole through some regulation that they deemed necessary without proper notice that the people understand. You are educated. You are highly educated and capable of going ahead, mandating and regulating this. How many people out there are not educated, do not have high school diplomas, do not know how to address the MPSC? Call your offices, call the governors on that, and they get no response except accept the meter. They are being harmed health-wise, financially-wise, and possibly even may die this winter due to lack of electricity because DTE cut them off at the pole without proper notice. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Holton. I need a motion to excuse absent members, if we have any. So moved by Vice Chair Lisinski. Members, you may go ahead and depart. I'm going to take the time to read in all the cards for the record. In support of a bill to allow people the option of having an analog meter, Anita Gajewski, Deanna Hilbert, Brian Proshka, David Lanier, Pamela Wallace, Mike Mullen, Paul Klitzman, Michelin Trosper, Sharon Bauman, Ms. Risen, Jeanine Deal, Leonard Gajewski, again, John Deal, Joe Krimner, John Korzuski, Jamie Chimner, Sheila Pomerensky, Mima Monteleone, and Sharon Miller. With that having been read into the record, I'll simply say that I don't have to be a physician to be distressed by the testimony I've heard, and if I was DTE and Consumers Public Relations Consultant, I'd be telling them to figure out some way to make this issue go away. With that said, the House Energy Policy Committee is adjourned.